from the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Steve Atwater.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight, breaking down what we know so far about the Broncos 53-man roster. Joining me in studio right now, the one and only Steve Atwater. What up, Steve?
What's going on, R. Edwards? How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Yeah, when we're recording this, cuts are still kind of flying in. By the time people are watching this, maybe we know what the 53 is. Heck, by the time you're watching this, you might even know the practice squad, but we're going to go over what we know so far and a little bit of the surprises, the things that jumped out to us that maybe we didn't see necessarily coming. I'm going to start with the wide receivers because that seemed to draw the most interest coming out of training camp in the preseason because we thought, okay, the back end of that roster looks a little bit interesting. Trinity Benson, who was by all accounts a lock for the roster, is a trade to the Detroit Lions for a 5th and a 7th rounder in 2022. The Broncos are sending a 6th rounder in 2023. What did you think about that move?
Well, I was totally surprised. It kind of came out of the blue, but with the number of receivers that we have on the team, and we only got one football on Sundays, and receivers like to get that football. They did, I think, made a really good move to get some value for Trinity Benson. And Trinity, he hasn't started in a game here for the Broncos. And for him to have garnered that much attention from another team, that says a lot about him and the work that he's put in and the tape that he's shown to get those guys interested.
I mean, it's not even starting. He hasn't even played in a regular season game yet. So you got a 5th rounder for a guy. And remember, Detroit may not be all that good this year. That might end up being a top 150 pick. But the point being here, the most of the reaction when I first saw it was negative. Fans had started to really like Trinity Benson, a guy that has worked his way up to this point. But the fact is, you have 4 starting guys right off the top. There's really no question. It feels as though this move cements Deontay Spencer's spot on the roster, unless something comes up where a guy's released and the Broncos decide, no, we like this guy better as a returner, because that's kind of how Deontay Spencer ended up getting the job in the first place, because he was waived by the Steelers, and the Broncos ended up picking up. So there's always that fluidity in the roster. What's the 53-man as of this afternoon will not necessarily be the 53-man in a couple of days.
Yeah. And my take on that is unless a returner can come in here and also be an effective wide receiver or defensive back, they're going with Deontay Spencer because that's his role. He's very good at it. He got the touchdown last year, and Fangio wants more, and I'm sure Deontay Spencer wants more too. But he's our return guy. We know that he does that extremely well. Now, again, if KJ Hamler keeps his health and he's able to show that he can return, then at some point Deontay may become expendable. But at this time, I really like that move, and Deontay Spencer, he's going to be the returner for this year at least.
What I thought the surprising move of the receivers, even more so, well, maybe about the same as moving Trinity Benson to Detroit, was the fact that we thought it was going to be a battle between Seth Williams, Tyree Cleveland, and Kendall Hinton, and all 3 of those guys got waived.
Yeah, I thought Seth Williams being a draft pick would definitely make the roster, and he had the one really good play, but I always was thinking too, though, that on special teams he just didn't show up like he needed to show up, and I know you don't have a ton of opportunities. The ball maybe kicked to the other side of the field or whatever, but when you have an opportunity, you're a lower round draft pick or a free agent, you got to get the coach's attention by hitting somebody or making a big tackle, doing something to make the crowd go crazy in the preseason, and I haven't seen that from him, and I think that hurt.
Definitely opportunities for practice squad for these guys. I think Seth Williams is a absolute, if they can bring him back, if they get him back. There are other receivers out there in the market, so it seems like the Broncos have a really good shot at bringing back their draft pick from this year. Tyree Cleveland might be in that same category, maybe even Kendall Hinton. But I think more than anything, we had framed this as, okay, Trinity Benson and Deontay Spencer maybe vying for the returning job. They trade Trinity Benson. They keep Deontay Spencer. At least that's the way it's going to look. And then what's going to happen with that 6th, maybe 7th wide receiver? Maybe there's another move in here. Speaking of other moves, the Broncos did another trade this morning, and this was with Jonas Griffith, the linebacker from the 49ers. This is mostly a special teams move. This guy graded out as the 9th best special teams player per Pro Football Focus this season so far during the preseason, right? So 9th best Pro Football Focus grade out there for special teams. And he played a total of 34 special team snaps, which no other Broncos player did. So Vic Fangio, following the Rams game, said he wants better play from the players, better coaching from special teams. This is a purely special teams move, at least right now.
Yeah, I mean, you think that's the case, but I mean, I don't know what research that they've done on Jonas prior to this year. You know, a lot of times GMs, they have guys who they've researched in previous years, and they like players, and they get an opportunity, they sometimes jump at it. So, you know, he may be able to. He may be a good defensive linebacker as well. We'll have to see that once he gets here. I wasn't able to take a deep enough dive. There wasn't any NFL film available for him to see. I couldn't see the preseason. I couldn't even see the preseason game to see him run down on the kickoff team in that. So I'm hoping that he'll be able to contribute at the linebacker position as well if the need arises.
He's got speed, and that's something that the Broncos definitely could use more. I think any more with linebackers.
Hold on, how do you know he got speed?
That's the write-up I'm reading on him right now. That's not with my own eyes. That is with somebody else's eyes. I'll find it here in a second. But that was the write-up on him.
4.8.
Well, I mean, if you're
faster than you, huh?
I was gonna say, if I in a position, is that gonna be back for the shoulder pad thing?
I'm sorry.
I probably earned that one. Anyways, that's the write-up I read on him this morning. I don't know specifically much about him other than what I've read about him and being aware of the name. He's an undrafted guy, so again, kind of where he came. I think it was Indiana.
Most undrafted guys are hungry.
Yes,
you know, and they're going to do what they can to make the roster, and then once they make it, they continue to work hard. So I'm confident that will be the case here with Jonas.
Okay, a couple other cuts that jumped out a little bit. Let's go to the offensive line. The undrafted player, Drew Himmelman, was a guy that really super large human being, 6'9", 300-plus pound offensive tackle. He ended up getting waived. Austin Schlottman got waived.
A little bit of a surprise. Well, I won't say surprise, but I know he was battling, and I thought that the Broncos may consider keeping him because he had some experience, at least playing in some games. But, hey, they decided to go with Quinn Miners, even though he doesn't have very much experience playing the center position. But he looked good at the guard position. Mm-hmm. We know he can block.
Oh, yeah. And Natani Moody is the other interior guy. They also Quinn Bailey, offensive tackle Quinn Bailey.
Yes.
So it looks like, at least as we're sitting here today, that we already knew Calvin Anderson was on the roster. We knew Massey was going to be your starting right tackle. It looks like, as of this moment, unless something changes, Cam Fleming.
We weren't sure about Cam Fleming. We knew that they paid him a good amount of money, and many times when that happens, I think you give guys a little bit longer leash. But yeah, he hasn't played as well as he would have liked to have played, and as well as Broncos Country would have liked him to play up to this point. But there's certainly room for improvement, and he has a good room of guys to encourage him and to help get him to that next level.
Staying on the offensive side of the ball, let's go to the tight ends. Sean Bayer and Austin Fort both were waived, and we sort of thought Eric Saubert had done enough over the course of training camp in the preseason to be the guy in there. I think Andrew Beck's going to probably end up being the fourth guy, again, versatile kind of hybrid guy. But that room more or less kind of shook out as the way we sort of thought it would. Yeah, and
I really didn't know who Eric Saubert was before he signed with the team. But, man, he really did well in preseason, and good at blocking, good at running routes, good at running after the catch. Does a lot of things well. And, he's going to see the field quite a bit, too. Even with Noah Fant and Albert O, he's going to see the field some. And of course, Beck playing that kind of fullback and tight end role. But Sauber's going to see the field, too.
Oh, definitely. Let's switch over to the defensive side. And again, we're kind of just going over the guys we know and what it tells us about the roster. We'll go to the pass rushers because Derek Tuska was a name that was going to be kind of on the bubble, kind of on the cusp there. We're going to see if Jonathan Cooper was going to make the roster. It certainly looks like he might have played his way on. And Andre Metz, the undrafted pass rusher. Cooper was definitely going to be on there. It would have been really shocking. Like, all these moves are kind of like, once in a while you see something that's maybe mildly surprising, but Cooper, he definitely earned that. But Andre Metz was a guy that I said coming into training camp I thought had a great shot. They were paying him more than any of the other undrafted players, and he looked great early on in training camp in this offseason. Didn't show up a ton in the games, but again, it also tells us a little bit about the perspective of the coaching staff sometimes, is it isn't always about the games.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, it plays a big part, but it's also about what you do in practice. Who knows the defenses? What's your work ethic like? Are you on time for meetings? Are you doing all the things right aside from what you do on the field to make the confidence have coaches that they can count on you if one of the big dogs goes down? And apparently he's done enough of that, and hopefully he continues to do that and is able to remain on the team.
The other 7th rounder, Marquise Spencer, was waived, but another guy that you'd probably like to have back on the practice squad.
Absolutely.
Had a couple of nice moments in the offseason. I certainly would like to see him back here. Let's go to the secondary for a second, because one surprise for me was Nate Hairston. And I thought Nate Hairston would make it because you still don't have a Sang Bassey. Duke Dawson is not available. Looks like both those guys are going to start the season on the PUP. So if Nate Hairston is not on this roster, then that means Kerry Vincent is the guy that made it, and maybe they just view him as pretty similar players that ultimately both have similar skill sets.
Yeah, and I think Nate Hairston, a guy in his position, he really had to make some plays here in the preseason, especially when you bring in young guys, because coaches, GMs, they're going to go with the younger guy if he's equal or close to you. Nate's done enough, but he still, I feel like he could have, well, again, could have, but you got to be in a position to make plays. But I would like to see him make more plays during the preseason. But yeah, Kerry Vincent, I was pretty confident they're going to keep him. Younger guys again. He showed the speed. He's made a couple of plays on the deep ball. He's running right there step for step with the receivers. Hey, that's a good trade, and that's some good tools to work with for the defensive backs coaches.
And Mac McCain and Parnell Motley were the other cornerbacks that also were waived, so didn't bring those guys up, but mostly expected up to this point. The safety, Trey Marshall, who's been on this roster last couple of years, he was waived, but he was hurt, so you kind of knew that was a possibility there.
Oh, yeah, it's hard, man. Can't make the club in the tub. And,
but
unfortunately,
you had 2 young safeties you drafted that both played well.
Yeah. And, I like Trey Marshall. But, yeah, with Jamar Johnson and Caden Stearns from Texas, man, and then P.J. Locke, he was a former Texas player too. Those guys just played well, and I thought they would keep 4 safeties, but they ended up keeping 5 because you couldn't let Caden Stearns, Jamar Johnson, or P.J. Locke go. And I kind of had as my number 2 safeties P.J. Locke and Caden Stearns, and I had Jamar Johnson in that 5th row just because I hadn't seen enough of them, but he did well on special teams, one of the highest-rated safeties playing the special teams according to PFF, and the coaches, got some good tools to work with there.
A couple more things here. Brett Rippon was waived, and so it looks like the Broncos are going to go with 2 quarterbacks, which again frees up a roster spot somewhere else. Probably another guy you'd like to have back on the practice squad if you can have him. So there's quite a few of these guys. We just don't necessarily know if they'll clear, they'll come back. The Broncos definitely have their interests. I'd say Adam Prentice is another guy, fullback, they'd like to have back here because he's, a nice backup for Andrew Beck. We know up to this point that Mike Boone will likely be placed on IR, according to multiple reports, that he will make the 53-man roster, and then they're going to place him on IR, which means he's going to be out for at least 3 weeks. And then Duke Dawson and Sang Bassey are going to be out for the first 6 weeks because they're on the PUP. They were physically unable to perform. They will not be available for at least 6 weeks. So I think that kind of rounds out, for the most part, of where we're sitting right now. But roster's kind of taking shape. Can't say enough, though. What the initial 53 isn't always what the week 1 53 is going to be, because guys get waived, and the coaching staff, the front office, they're all looking at some of the players that are getting released around the league. There's a couple of big name receivers. Travis Fulgham out of the Eagles was their number 1 guy. He got waived today. Also, Antonio Gandy-Golden, who I'm a really big fan out of Liberty from last year, but he was with Washington. He got waived. So there's a couple of names out there on waivers. So if the Broncos are at that 5 or 6 mark with the wide receivers, certainly wouldn't shock me whatsoever if they brought one of these guys in.
Yeah, I just can't see that happening at the wide receiver position, especially considering that they traded away Trinity Benson, a guy who, had a ton of talent and, was doing really well in the preseason and showed the coaches that he knows the offense, everything. I can't imagine them going and, adding another receiver at this point. I would say the guys who we have in that room, Seth Williams and those guys, they'll probably get an opportunity to come back on the practice squad. And I would say, man, 95% of the roster is there. I mean, it may just be a few changes here and there, but for the most part, this is what Broncos Country got to look forward to beginning of the season. I think it's a great roster.
I agree. Well said. We'll come back with more tomorrow, later on this week, more than likely, as we get a full perspective on what the 53-man roster as well as the practice squad looks like. Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight.